of those prisoners knew what they were coming up against, and they would have quite happily taken their own lives. General hanging took 45 minutes. We do have on record hangings that took 4 hours. I did question why they took so long. I found out that the hangman was often drunk. It was the type of a job that you'd need drink to actually do it. Apart from that, it was a disgraceful job. Family members of those that were hangmen, they really didn't like it. It was a disgraceful job to have back then. On the other side, back here you can see a spy hole. On the other side of the wall, behind that lady, you would have had the hangman. He would have peered in with a few pints in him, in through this tiny little spy hole at the prisoner in here. Now he would try and estimate the height and the weight of that prisoner in order to determine which length of rope or what length of rope to use in the hanging. So this is why it often went wrong. The other reason I have you in here is because this is where Robert Emmet was held before he was brought to Thomas Street to be hung, drawn and quartered. Now Robert Emmet's rebellion of 1803 wasn't really a huge success in military terms. It lasted about 45 minutes. And it was a failed rebellion. So after the rebellion, Robert Emmet fled to Wicklow. He knew he'd be looked for. So the authorities couldn't find him, so they called around to his house and they arrested his housekeeper, Anne Devlin. Now she was 26 years of age when they brought her here, and they brought her here to try and get her to tell of his whereabouts. She would have known this. She also would have known about 16 other men that were involved in that failed rebellion. So they brought her here to try and get her to speak out. The woman refused. So over this side of the room, down in the basement, we passed them the confinement cells. Anne Devlin, at 26 years of age, was held in a confinement cell for 2.5 years. Now, during those 2.5 years, it's believed that the jailer did not allow any light into that confinement cell. But Robert Emmet, in the meantime, returned to Dublin to see his girlfriend, Miss Curran. While he was here, he was arrested and held in this room before he was brought to Thomas Street. Now, in Thomas Street, you would have had a large crowd of people, you would have had a scaffold, and he was brought out and he was hung until the brink of death. Then a butcher's block was taken out onto the scaffold and his head was chopped off. So that was the end of Robert Emmet, but in the meantime, poor Anne Devlin was still down in the confinement cell. At any point, the woman could speak out. She could give a few names. She would have gotten money for this. She would have been set up for the rest of her life, and she also would have been let out of Kilmainham jail, but she refused. She emerged at almost 29 years of age. She couldn't stand up straight. She was riddled with arthritis, and she had lost practically all of the sight in both of her eyes because the jailer at the time was a very, very mean jailer, and it's believed that he stopped any light going into that confinement cell. So what Robert Emmet is famous for, though, is his attempt at a rebellion. Also, the most famous thing about Robert Emmet is his speech from the dock. He made a speech to the Irish public. It lasted about an hour. If you're not aware of it, look it up on the internet, go into a bookshop, read it. You don't have to buy the book, just read the speech. It definitely is worth just reading it even once. Lincoln has quoted this speech. And the other reason I like to mention Anne Devlin, because in my opinion she's one of the strongest women in Irish history, and she really just tells the tale of all those women that were involved in the rising and in the failed rebellions, because women were really at the backbone of a lot of this. They carried messages from one leader to the next. The reason it worked out so well, the British government did not believe that the women would be playing a part in the rising. So Robert Emmet is famous for his attempt at a rebellion, his speech from the dock. And all the leaders of the 1916 Rising would have looked up to this man because they followed in his footsteps. He laid the foundation stone and they followed. So we'll move along. It is the press and it's getting very warm in here.